Welcome to the Fade 5 College Football Edition here on YouTube. Ben Wittenstein, and next to me, the great Nate Jacobson. Nate, we're heading into November already for college football. We're coming off a pretty decent week. I think I should say so myself. How are you feeling? How are you looking?
I know you had a good week. Not so much for me. Just off the top of my head, I know the two picks in the articles did not go well. The UCF bet, which had no shot, and then the under in A&M LSU, which I'll probably get to a little bit later in the show when I talk about one of the games involving Texas A&M. But yeah, we're into November for college football purposes. And last week, before the college football playoff show is revealed on a Tuesday night, so maybe we'll get a little bit more context of where teams stand in terms of the eyes of the college football playoff committee, which at the end of the day is all that really matters when it comes to rankings, because in November, we're going to have a lot of games between teams just outside the top 12 who might think they have a shot at making the playoff, which should lead to more interesting games that we could break down each week on this podcast.
Absolutely. So we've got a full slate of bets for the weekend this weekend. And if you just pick and choose your spots, you got some fun games. You know, you don't have a lot of the big name teams playing against each other like we did in week 7, week 8, but there's some fun matchups this weekend. And as we pull up onto the plus bus, Nate, our first bets of the weekend that we like, that is plus money. Do you want to start or do you want me to start? We can go either way.
I'll give it a start if you want me to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was against Indiana last week. Didn't quite go so well. Again,
I'd warn you.
Going with Washington. Consider maybe picking on Indiana one more time and going with Michigan State, but I think we can get a better number later in the week, especially if Indiana quarterback Curtis Rourke is in. So make sure to follow, my other accounts and me on Action Network app, where I might add in a play on the Spartans, but plus the points. But I'm actually going to go with plus bus here with Arkansas on the money line. I did bet this at +8 early in the week. Like Arkansas, number +210, +200s out there. Don't really believe in Ole Miss, who's the team they're playing. It's an early game at Arkansas, so I don't know what I saw from Ole Miss last week off a bye against Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is probably now one of the worst teams in the SEC, ahead of like a team like Mississippi State, which isn't saying much. And Ole Miss struggled against that Oklahoma team, and now they go on the road. They're playing Georgia next week. Ole Miss is not a team that could afford to lose, so I don't think there's really a look ahead. But just something to keep in mind that they, a team that's not necessarily the most disciplined under Lane Kiffin. Maybe they're not totally focused. And they also have a few injuries. Trey Harris, wide receiver, missed last week. Not sure if he's going to go this week. And then Walter Nolan left last week's game, the prize transfer from Texas A&M. So a few injuries on Ole Miss's side. Arkansas, not the best team, but they have been tested, at least from a strength of schedule standpoint. And maybe they have one good performance here at home. So I'll take a shot on Arkansas at a pretty big money line price for Saturday.
Yeah, I don't think that's the worst bet of all time. I mean, I think people's opinion of Arkansas has maybe gone down a little bit enough where you can get them at a pretty good number for something like this. For my plus bus, Nate, we're going to go out west to the great state of Seattle, out to Washington. We're going to take their money line against USC at +125. This is more of a fade. I guess it's a fade of USC and following Washington after a couple bad losses. Washington coming off that loss against Indiana wasn't a great spot for them. They had to go for game day. I think they go back home. They play a USC team that clearly is not the USC team of last year. It's clearly not a USC team that Lincoln Riley was expecting to have this season. They closed practice to media members this week. It just kind of looks like a lot of stuff is kind of falling apart over there in LA. Now they have to get on a plane. After playing at Maryland 2 weeks ago, they have to do another trip now up to Washington, which is a tough place for people to play. Washington's 4-1 at home this season. USC 0-3 on the road. I just think spot-wise, to get Washington as a home dog against a struggling USC team, to me, it seems like a good play. You can get Washington at plus money. To me, seems easy enough.
Yeah, I don't know if I totally agree with I'm not going to talk you out of this play. It's a weird game. I feel like USC is a better team than their record indicates, because they've had those 3 really close losses. But at the same time, the fact that they were playing close games against teams like Minnesota, Maryland, even the Wisconsin game where they ended up pulling away was not a pretty beginning of the game for USC. So, yeah, I could see maybe Washington knowing that you probably need to win this game if you want to make a bowl because you still have Penn State and Oregon on the schedule. So, yeah, if Washington wants to go, it'd be not a good look to pull the TCU and go to the national title game to bowl ineligibility for Washington, even though they do have some excuses because of all the roster turnover, the travel in the first year in the Big Ten. But yeah, I won't talk you out of it, but I could also see a scenario where USC maybe closes out closes out a close game instead of failing at the end.
Let's get into the nitty gritty as we get into our Fade 5, our top 5 plays of the weekend. We'll start with number 5.
Number 5.
Nate, I will take this one as we go to the great state of Michigan as they play Indiana for Michigan State in East Lansing. And listen, I want to tail Indiana to the edge of the earth. They're an absolute wagon. No one has been able to stop them. They're killers against the spread. Yet, their quarterback, Curtis Rourke, has been dealing with some injuries. Taven Jackson came in against Washington last week. It was game day, sold out stadium at home, did what he had to do to get the win. But now Indiana goes on the road with possibly an injured quarterback. I don't know if I can back them to cover a spread at a really high number considering how hot they have been. And also, I just don't know how Rourke is going to play on the road in a tough environment. So I'm going to back the Indiana defense, get Michigan State's team total under 20.5 for a couple of reasons. First of all, Michigan doesn't have much of a passing game. They don't pass the ball well. They don't pass it that often. And because they don't pass it well, they run the ball a lot and they're, mid-range in running the ball and success rate. But Indiana's defense, Nate, is really good against the run. They're top 20 in opponent success rate on the ground. They do a really good job of limiting teams on the ground, 3.4 yards per rush, which is good for, I believe it's like 28th in the country. So their run defense is there. So if Michigan State tries to run the ball on them, they're not going to be able to do it. Also, Michigan State averages 18.7 points per game this season against FBS teams. They scored 40 against Prairie View. I'm not going to put that in the average. So the average is lower than the team total. In this one, Indiana's given up 15.7 points per game. So really, this is just a big numbers play to me where I just don't see Michigan State being able to score over 20 points. They haven't done it in 4 of their last 5 games. They've been struggling. They did it against Iowa for some reason with Iowa's really good defense. I'm not sure how they were able to do that so successfully, but they were able to do it. But other than that, they haven't been able to show any offensive ability. So to me, Indiana comes in. Maybe they run the ball more because Rourke is hurt. Maybe they try to choose some clock. But defensively, I just struggle to see the ways that that Michigan State can be able to score consistently against this Indiana defense.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm a little concerned about Indiana. This feels like kind of their first true road game because their other road games this season in the Big Ten were against UCLA, which a lot of Indiana fans travel to, being the first West Coast trip for the Hoosiers is a bit in the Big Ten, and then they played Northwestern. And I mean, we can just Ben lives in Chicago, went to Indiana, so that shows how many Hoosiers alum are in this area. Plus,
there's a lot,
like a practice facility they're playing at. So this is going to be a really raucous atmosphere. Michigan State's pretty excited. They think they can make a bowl game, and they have a really good coach in Jonathan Smith, a fun quarterback in Aiden Childs. So it's definitely a potential where Michigan State could have some success offensively. They could also really struggle because Childs kind of has a low floor and can turn the ball over. So, yeah, it's a fascinating game. I kind of lean to the underdog as I kind of hinted at the top. Maybe it is a low-scoring game as we kind of get into November, and maybe the weather starts cooling down around the Midwest. Although, I don't know, today feels like April or May as we talk about this, preview this on October 30th.
It's really warm somehow. I don't really understand how it's working. Yeah, it's great. I went for a lovely walk, contemplated all my bets in perfect weather.
Me too.
That means we should win them, honestly. So let's go with that being known. Let's go to number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, my first pick number 4, Texas A&M-South Carolina under the 44.5, which is available. There's some 44 out there. Obviously, try to get 44.5. I bet the under early in the week. I also bet the underdog in this game at South Carolina plus 3.5. I would still take plus 3 or better if it gets there, but right now we're kind of sitting 2.5 on the Aggies as a favorite. Obviously, 3 a key number, especially in a game with low total. So I'd wait for that. But I think it's a good spot to fade Texas A&M off how they beat LSU. It's a very kind of strange game where I was on the under at 54 in the game, felt pretty good when it was 17-7, and Connor Wegman was really struggling against the improved LSU defense. And then Mike Elko made a bold switch, but it worked out perfectly where he puts in Marcel Reed, who started a few games in September for A&M, and Reed leads 4 touchdown drives in a row. The game soars over the total. A&M kind of looks like this new rejuvenated team with the offense, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a difficult situation for Reed if he is indeed the starter. Now there's, South Carolina will be prepped for him. Clearly LSU was only prepped for Wegman, and when a different style of quarterback came in, they dearly struggled to stop the quarterback run game. South Carolina has a really good defensive line, so I think between the prep and just kind of the personnel, they'll be able to get Reed to struggle a little bit, especially if he's going to have to throw the ball on the road. It's a little bit different playing a night game at Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina, than behind the 12th man at Texas A&M. So I could see Reed struggling a little bit. And if A&M runs the ball a lot, that will churn clock. And on the other side, I like the Texas A&M defense against South Carolina's offense. Dow Loggins, a guy that we used to talk about on a show that we did last year, the former NFL offensive coordinator who basically was like an Adam Gase disciple. He went wherever Adam Gase went, and Adam Gase is not a good coach, so it kind of shows how bad he is. Not really sure why he's the offensive coordinator at South Carolina, but he's there. They have a quarterback in Lenoris Sellers who's had some decent moments, but it's mostly through the run game. He doesn't have a great passing ability. So I think we have 2 quarterbacks here that are more runners than throwers, and 2 pretty good defensive lines in this matchup. And I do like the under here because of that. I think it's correlated with the underdog. Fortunately, the number has gotten away from us on South Carolina plus the points because I really do need +3 in this game. But in terms of the total, I think there's still a little bit of value there going under the 44.5 on Saturday evening, the ABC game. So it should be a great atmosphere for South Carolina, who's had a pretty solid season at 4-3 and has tough losses against LSU and Alabama.
I'm really glad this is a night game because I'm going to need a little liquid courage to garner up the ability to bet South Carolina's money line. Because I do think this is a really good spot for South Carolina. Like you said, I would love +3. If we don't get +3 and have a little drinks down at the pub, maybe fire off on their money line. This is a great spot, I think, for South Carolina. I really like the under for that reason as well. They've seen Marcel Reed play. They're prepping for him specifically, which is huge as well. Yep. And I think them having to go on the road, play at South Carolina at night, who, again, this is a team that theoretically they could be like 6-1. This if a couple things go their way, like they could be already a 6-win team. So to me, I really like South Carolina here, getting the points, but I do love the money line. I just may need a little courage, a little push to push that button on the money line.
That's totally fair. And then their other loss, I should have mentioned, it wasn't a close game, but they lost to Ole Miss too. So yes. A blowout loss to Ole Miss in a game that stayed under the total, and kind of a similar situation where there was like kind of a big home game that they were hosting a top team in the SEC, if you want to consider A&M on top team. And then the close losses, LSU, where they were up pretty much the whole game, missed a field goal at the end that would have sent it to overtime. And then the Alabama game, losing 27-25 in Tuscaloosa. So I know this isn't the same Alabama team we're used to, but still they cover the spread by like 20 points that game. So I think if those games go a little bit differently, I think we're looking at like a kind of a pick 'em situation here. So anything with a plus sign might be worth a small bet if you do have the liquid courage, as Ben mentioned, on Saturday evening.
All right, next up.
Number 3.
Nate, I think Syracuse and myself, I think we're soulmates. Because this is like, I can't stay away from them. This is like the third week. I don't think it's the third week in a row, but it's the third week of the show that I have liked the orange in the situation that they're in, because we're going to go with Syracuse +4 in this game. I think this is a very good spot. They're coming off a very bad game against Pittsburgh. They looked terrible. They threw 5 interceptions. Kyle McCord, no touchdowns, 5 picks against Pittsburgh. They ran for 6 total yards, which still blows my mind. I've been looking at the team stats from that game multiple times, and I just don't understand how they ran for 6 total yards and 2 rushing touchdowns as part of those 6 total yards. So it was just a weird, funky, bad game for Syracuse. Now they go back home after 3 straight road games in October. This is they spend all of October on the road. They finally get to go home to the JMA Wireless Dome, where they call home, and they play Virginia Tech, a team that's come in kind of hot. They won their past couple of games. But I think Syracuse's passing game is going to be what wins it for them here. I just don't think Vatek is going to be able to keep up with how good the Syracuse offense can be and is. We see Kyle McCord maybe have a bit of a comeback game. We know that the Hokies struggle sometimes in their pass defense. And I think if the Hokies try to run the ball on Syracuse, which they do a lot, they run the ball 57% of the time of their offensive snaps, which is a top 30 run team in the nation. I don't know if they're just going to be able to keep up with how much Syracuse passes the ball. I mean, they may pass it 50 plus times in this game at home. So I think because of Syracuse's passing game, getting the 4 points back at home after a road trip, you're kind of getting a low number for this Cuse team because of how bad they look. They're not going to look that bad again. They're going to bounce back at home. I don't think the Hokies defense is going to keep up with the passing game. I like taking the 4 points here. I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, I think you were on them maybe before we did the show. It was, I think, week 2. Syracuse was hosting Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was playing already their third game of the season because they had that big win against Florida State that turns out not to be as impressive as the Florida State season's gone on. And then you had Syracuse, like probably a month ago, they played at UNLV. And obviously UNLV is pretty highly regarded at this point. So I do remember that you have a good read on Syracuse. I'll be honest. I hope you're let's hope Syracuse wins or loses by 1 to 3 points, because I bet Syracuse under 7.5 wins before the season. I believe they're 5-2 right now. They kind of have an interesting stretch here where they're playing a lot of toss-up games in the ACC, where I'm going to need them to lose 2 of those games, and then hopefully they lose to Miami to end the year, where Miami might be 11-0, trying to cap off a perfect regular season. So this would be personally a nice game for me for Syracuse to lose. But I'm not totally bought in on Virginia Tech. Yeah,
Vatek's also they have some running back injuries as well as some defensive line injuries that they have to sort through. I think everyone's going to be healthy, but I don't know if they're going to be 100%. So again, if Vatek can't run the ball, they're going to be forced to pass, which they're not very good at passing. I think they're like 105th in drop back success. They might struggle on the road here after a couple big wins. Syracuse in a bounce back situation. All right, Nate, we will go to you.
Number 2.
Yeah, let's go to Louisville. Kind of maybe a surprise pick here. Don't usually cover too much ACC. Don't really have a great feel on that conference, but I'm going to take a shot here against Clemson. So Louisville plus 11 right now, minus 112 at DraftKings. 10.5 is fine. Pretty much 10.5 across the board. So you should be able to get this at a pretty good number. Just not sure how good Clemson is. And I think we kind of have learned in college football that there are some teams that we kind of potentially overvalue or just kind of crown as one of the best teams in the country before they played anyone good. We saw this 3 weeks ago in week 7 when Ohio State went to Oregon, and everyone's talking about how good Ohio State is and how they're, no one's going to be able to touch them talent wise in the Big Ten. And then Oregon goes out and beats them. And then a week later with Texas, where everyone really was doubting Georgia. And I understood the doubts in Georgia, but I also had doubts in Texas, who really didn't play anyone good up until that point. And then they lose to Georgia. So I think we might be falling into the same thing here with Clemson, a team that did lose in week 1 to Georgia, and Dabo Swinney got a lot of criticism for the quirky things he says and the refusal to use the transfer portal. But I feel like Clemson's kind of gone under the radar, and they're doing really well. They're, they've won 6 straight. The closest margin of victory was 16 points against Florida State. They also beat App State, NC State, Stanford, Wake Forest, and Virginia. And all those teams not very good this year, where maybe going in the year, those, beating NC State and Florida State would have been impressive wins, but looks far less impressive now. Stanford and Wake are 2 of the worst teams in the ACC, and Virginia, kind of an up-and-coming team in the ACC, but still definitely not anywhere close to a great, even an average team in that conference. So I think we're going to see Clemson be tested from now on until the end of the regular season. They do play at Virginia Tech next week. They play at Pitt in 2 weeks. They close with South Carolina, who I mentioned might, earlier in the show, might have some good things going for them on their defense. But I feel like that's one reason, just not believing in Clemson so much, but also wanting to back Jeff Brom in Louisville. in these kind of situations as a big underdog. Braum was at Purdue, got the most out of Purdue. They won a Big Ten West one year. They beat a then number 2 ranked Ohio State in 2018 by 29 points. They beat Iowa when Iowa was undefeated and ranked number 2 in 2021. I feel like Braum in these underdog roles where he can just scheme up stuff offense, play calling, and has a veteran quarterback and Tyler Shuck, who's 25, who shouldn't be intimidated by a big game at Tiger Stadium. So yeah, I like Louisville here, and I'll bet against Clemson and make them prove it to me that they're actually one of the top teams in college football, because I really don't think they've played anyone that's you should be. They definitely are better than I expected, but I don't think they're anywhere close to like a top 5 national title contender team.
Yeah, I really like that bet. I think that this is what you kind of talked about. You're following a team that's kind of been on the downslope and people kind of not been paying attention, and now they might come and surprise a lot of people, especially getting double-digit points against this Clemson team who, I mean, they've been playing well, but they still have a big, ample opportunity and possibility where they can slip up. I really like that idea. Shall we go to our favorite plays from? All right, let's do it. Number one, Nate. This is the big one, the big game of the week, which shockingly is at 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern Time. It's Ohio State traveling to Penn State, and we got bets, and we like a couple things. I guess you could start. Your name's first on the lower third. You start with your bet. What do you like?
Well, I wanted to say, I think your bet is also a first half bet, correct?
Oh, that's true. It is. Yeah. I was saying your name's first on the thing too, but listen, all right, we could delve into this because we both really like the first half. We both really like the first 30 minutes of this game. I could just talk about Penn State and talk about how it honestly goes with your bet, because I do think the under first half is the way to go for a game like this. I think because, and I wrote about this at the Gaming Juice where we talk about it, how both these teams are struggling with injury issues. Ohio State's struggling on the offensive line. Geralari, we don't know if his injury is going to be affecting him too much or not. So because of that, and I think you're going to talk more about the under, but I think because it's going to be low scoring, Penn State's going to have a pretty good chance of keeping it close, if not being slightly ahead by halftime, especially being at home. It's a whiteout game. This would have been great if it was at night, where you have, Happy Valley at night with all the fans in the whiteout. It's going to be a little sleepy to start this game. I think both teams are going to be affected by that, especially with Ohio State trying to figure out their offense without a healthy offensive line. And we know how much Howard has struggled at times as well for Ohio State. So I don't know if I see OSU pushing the ball a lot into the end zone in the first quarter. Typically, and I wrote this in the article, they have averaged 21 points a game in the first half on average, but over their last 3, it's down to 14. So because of some of those issues on the offensive line, I think they have really struggled to start games fast. So this, to me, is a big bet just against Ohio State being able to extend any type of a lead in the first half. And I think Penn State keeps it close. Maybe they run the ball with quarterback injury issues a lot. They keep time of possession. They're 28th in time of possession percentage. So they are really good at holding on to that football. I think we see a lot of that in the first half, at least when they go through a lot of their scripted plays and their scripted drives. So Penn State keeps it close, covered the 2.5. Tell us about why you like that first half under, though, as I kind of went into it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the game script you mentioned. That would definitely suit a lower scoring game, especially early on. I do also like the full game under, but just wanted to keep it first half for this specific segment. The injuries that you kind of mentioned, Ohio State offensive line, Josh Simmons got hurt in the Oregon game a few weeks ago. His backup, Zen Mikowski, left last week's game in the fourth quarter against Nebraska. He was already kind of struggling, and so was the whole offensive line. They had 20 running back carries with Henderson and Judkins for only 54 yards. So that's kind of concerning that they weren't able to run the ball. And Penn State, very good defensive line. And also something else I didn't mention in the article that will be coming out, but Tom Allen, Penn State defensive coordinator, so he's used to facing Ohio State from his days as Indiana's coach. He kind of, Indiana held Ohio State to only 23 points last year, and Penn State's talent much better than the Indiana talent that he had. And with the focus on the defense, I feel like he could have a pretty good game plan for this game. So that's the Ohio State injury side. When Penn State has the ball, maybe we'll see Drew Prabula, who led the second half comeback at Wisconsin. And he's not too much of a downgrade to Aller, but at the same time, there's film on him now. Ohio State has a very good defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles. I know I like Penn State's offensive coordinator, Andy Kolodnicki, who is doing great things at Kansas with much less talent and has done pretty well at at Penn State. But I'd say Ohio State, a very experienced defense, would have an answer, whether it is a banged up Aller or Prbula, who now has film on him. So yeah, I like the under here, just kind of in general. But if you want to just isolate it to first half, which I am also going to do, I'm using that as the pick for this kind of group think segment that we've been doing, where we're either
Group
agreeing
ride,
or disagreeing. So we're kind of agreeing, and we're both on a first half bet in this game. So.
Yep.
Just 30 minutes, hopefully on a kind of a low scoring game where maybe Penn State has a lead or it's tied at halftime.
Yeah, I wanted to just keep it to that first 30 minutes because we were talking about this, how we both have seen Ohio State be able to just take away the game in the second half, and they're just able to pull away. They make really good adjustments at halftime. So I know Penn State is a very good team, and they might not allow those adjustments to happen, but the first half is really, to me, it's a much safer handicapping in a game like this.
Yep, and Penn State also has an injury concern at right tackle. Forgot to get the player's name off the top of my head, but he left the game against Wisconsin. Tough a little bit to figure out college injury reports because there's not a lot of news that comes out. So we'll be very interested to see which players play and which do not play, as there's like 3 or 4 players that are kind of impactful to potentially the spread in total of this game.
Absolutely. Don't forget, you can rate, review, and subscribe to this very podcast. Brad puts podcasts out. We put podcasts out. I mean, it's a great whole bunch. You get your NFL, you get your college football, you get your player props, whatever you may think you want. We got it here on the Fade 5, especially on the YouTube channel. So smash that subscribe button, as the kids say these days. But Nate, it's bonus time. We got bonus time bets that we have right before we end the show. I will start out with my bonus time bet because it's pretty simple. It's the Wisconsin-Iowa over 40.5. Now, I had the Iowa over last week, and that hit by just Iowa's score. They scored 40, and the over was 38.5, I believe. I don't know. I know Wisconsin games sometimes have tended to go under, and they sometimes don't hold up their end of the bargain. But I still don't know if the market has caught up to Iowa overs. They're 7-1 to the over this season. They've hit 4 of their last 5 overs. And by the way, it's not like they're just creeping by on these overs. In the 4 games they have hit the over in their last 5, they've averaged 14.5 points over the game total. So they're flying by these game totals. They're scoring 30-plus points in these games, sometimes hitting 40. I don't know. I got to follow this trend here of people thinking Iowa games go under. Iowa-Wisconsin games historically have gone under this number, but this is just a different Iowa team. They don't have as good of a defense last year. Their offense is playing a little bit better. They're now having a new quarterback come in, and it's running a little bit more efficiently. So to me, this game is at Iowa. I could see Iowa again scoring 30-plus points. So I'm going to take the over in this game.
Yeah, I was watching a little bit of that Northwestern Iowa game, actually. And during like the beginning of the game, it just seemed like there was going to be nothing offensively. And then Northwestern gets a pick 6. And that leads to Iowa making a quarterback change. However, I guess Iowa's quarterback, McNamara, is out for this game with an injury. But I think the big reason why I would actually agree with this over, after being kind of skeptical last week, is the change to Brendan Sullivan at Iowa. Seems just like a better quarterback that, just can do more than Cade McNamara. And like Wisconsin offensively, it's not great, but maybe they could score a little bit here and
touchdown,
go back and forth. Yeah,
10 points. Just score 10 points.
That's the thing. The total's not that high, and like we saw Locke make that horrible mistake against Penn State at home last week with the pick 6. I would not be surprised if Iowa scored a defensive or special teams touchdown in this game. And
I love it. We're into Iowa overs on this show. It's great. We got an under for your bonus time bet.
Yep, going back to a first half under. We're going Kentucky against Tennessee. I believe it's 23.5. Haven't personally bet this. Going to wait to see if this somehow gets to 24. Or kind of what happens. This game opened Tennessee like 16.5, and the total at 45.5 full game wise, and just hasn't moved. So I'm just kind of waiting to see the direction it moves in. I do have some concerns about Tennessee, and I'm going to have an article on the Gaming Juice about just not really believing in Tennessee. I think there's going to be some time to fade them, maybe sometime in the regular season, or potentially if they make the college football playoff with 12 teams. I feel like with that schedule that they actually have a pretty decent shot and making it. But Tennessee offensively just hasn't impressed me. If you kind of look at maybe some of their better performances early in the season against teams that we think are good competition, and NC State and Oklahoma, well, those teams have totally fallen off a cliff. And then you look at their last 3 games after their first bye week against Arkansas, Florida, and Alabama, and they haven't scored a point in the first half of any of those games. So I know they're coming off a bye here, so maybe Josh Heupel can kind of figure out the offense a little bit and they get off to a better start. But Kentucky is a team where I still believe in their defense, coached by Mark Stoops, and a pretty good defensive line that I still think can, at least for 30 minutes, play pretty well and continue these Tennessee first half struggles. And then other side, I just don't think Kentucky's going to provide much offense in this game. That's the reason why I'm not going to be betting Kentucky plus the points, at least most likely. So I do like the under in this game, because I do think if Kentucky does cover the spread, the under is going to have to hit, but also can see a path where Tennessee wins, like, I don't know, 28-10, and the full game goes under. But because of Tennessee's offensive struggles in the first half against Arkansas, Florida, and Alabama, definitely going to go under here in the first half, and going to wait to see if somehow like a 24 pops, which we'll see.
It might. If that happens, I'm taking it. I'm gonna tell you on this one. I really like this bet.
I'll be texting you on Saturday. This is a late kickoff on SEC Network, because Kentucky just hasn't held up their end of the bargain. They had that big win against Ole Miss, 20-17, which actually this game reminds me of that Ole Miss game where big underdog, Mark Stoops, slow the game down, knows how to play in those games. But then when they're expected to do well against teams like Vanderbilt, Florida, and Auburn last week, it didn't work out so well. So yeah, Kentucky in the big underdog role to keep a game close and play slow. That's what I'm looking for. So first half under in Knoxville on Saturday night.
Yeah, I really like this bet. I mean, Kentucky unders have generally, when you hit them at the right spots, they have been very profitable. So I like that bet a lot. Don't forget, you can sign up for free. TheGamingJuice.com. You can read Nate right there. You can read myself. It's all free. Sign up for an account. You can read Brad for your NFL picks and bets and fantasy advice. It's all there. It's all free. So sign up at TheGamingJuice.com. But for now, Nate, we bid everyone adieu. I want to thank everyone for listening. You have any final thoughts? I think this is going to be a good weekend. I feel good.
Yeah, no, I feel pretty good about the games I covered. We wrote a lot about them on the Gaming Juice. So if you're listening a little late, make sure to check out the written articles about these games for maybe a little bit extra perspective on everything.
Absolutely. Good luck to everyone, and we will see you all next week.